Thank you very much for joining us and taking your time. In this webinar, mostly Mitul will be talking about how the vibe coding application can be scaled and what things to be mitigated. But firstly, I would like to introduce myself and the team. I am Hitat, co-founder at Empirics, along with Mitul, and we have been helping. We are at the cross junction of India and Israel ecosystem. Have been helping the startup since 2018, and one of the early adopters as well to AI when the IBM Watson was the only option we had at the commercial space. And along the way, we helped a lot of startups to grow and scale. Have been part of many good journeys, and hope to be part of many good journeys furthermore. So yeah, the thing is that vibe coding starts with the emotion, and along the way that we always wish that it doesn't turn into the emotional breakdown. But unfortunately, most of the cases that we have been facing since last 2 years, that it happens a lot of time. So thought that we should start with collaborating more builders in the community. And thanks to Gabriel, who is also our partner, and he has been working with us since last 10 years. And yeah, so Mitul will be taking over from here. And one small thing that we want to have the extensive Q&A session at the end of this presentation, but we would also love to have your hands raised along the way if you want to discuss something interesting, or you want to have some query to be asked. So feel free, and we're open to discuss. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Hitarth. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm Mitul Suthar. I'm CTO at Empirics. Over the last 2 years, something has really changed, right? It's like building a working product went from 6 months to it's like a weekend project. And these days, people are doing they are just prompting, they are open. There are so many tools in the market, so people are prompting it. They just describe the app, and at the very next day your app is actually live, your MVP is live, right? And it's live with very good UI landing page, very good sign up flow, and maybe if someone you had you have discussed with your customers that you are planning to build something. So after an MVP, yes, you may have some paying customers, but everything is good up to when you have your application is handling certain users. And but at the same time, it's it's also created a brand new problem that really really exist 5 years ago. And what's that? It's what happened day after, right? That's everything. We are just thinking in our mind. So today I want to walk you through the exact moment, the one where your AI built up MVP actually start working. You have users, right? And suddenly you're starting at code base, and you didn't really write something, right? And you're just asking yourself, saying that do I trust these things to hold the weights, right? So by the end of this 30 minutes of our session or of our webinar, what you will know is that how the startup playbook has fundamentally changed. How to tell if your MVP is good enough, and yes, good enough at what, right? The 3 principles, or can say a decision framework, right? Like the refactoring, the rebuild, and the leave it standalone. So we'll see what are those particular 3 decision frameworks and how they are differentiate your entire MVP, the structure. The 7 warning signs your technical that is about about to bite you. And at last, a checklist that you can literally use this week, just to test if your application, your business is actually ready for this, for the scaling. So yeah, let's get into it. Okay, so let's start with the moment where you are probably like each and every founders, right, are currently in that stage. Is that you had an idea, right? You didn't write a single specific document. Previously, what happened, we have a team where we have a business analysis, right? They are creating some functional requirement document, business requirement document. But today, these days, you, as I said, you had an idea what you are doing. You are just opening some good tools, you are just describing it. Hey, this is in my mind, I just wanted to do this, my customer is asking for this and that, right? And that tool will give you a very good AI scaffolded front end, right? It actually wired up with some good database, or maybe as per your prompt, as you have defined the goals, right? It may be even generated as some good authentication mechanism and flow. Good, I mean, your application is ready, right? And people are actually using it. But here the things that nobody tells you about, the moment that an MVP built to prove like, does anyone want this? So this is the fundamental thinking behind this MVP, saying that does anyone want this, and where the next question is that, which is can this hold 1,000 people? Can your MVP integrate with n number of integrations, right? Or can your MVP is a good at, so any kind of payment mechanism, or any applications that you have developed, they will not fail, right? Or will not have certain issues. So while your applications, while your customers are actually engaging with your applications, they will not face issues, basically. So those are two completely different jobs. One is validation code, and another one is the infrastructure code, which they looks like a similar, but both are just they just actually code that runs differently. They are optimized for the different things, or can say opposite things. So one is actually optimized for speed of iterations, right? Where you are just validating your idea, and the other is actually optimized for reliability under the load, right? Let's say some users are using it. So those are the infrastructure part. When your application will hit the user bases, right? So so after that, you will definitely think on the infrastructure part. So these both are two different things. So here the question is that your question isn't that is my MVP bad? But actually the question is that what was this code actually will built to prove, right? And have I outgrow that proof? So that is the the lens that we are going to talk about in the sessions, right? So the way now people, or I can say founder or startup, their startup journey is actually changed. So here what I have done is I have just identified or I have just two different approaches. First is old model, and the second one is today's model. So here we are not trying to compare it, but it is something how things are changing. So in old model, you just think that way, you raise a pre-seed round, or maybe you have worked almost 15 or 20 years, you have your savings, right? So you save up everything in a personal runaway, and then you first hire, or maybe yourself involved in coding and business, everything, so you are giving your own time. And then after at certain point, you will hire a team, or you will hire some co-founder, or creating a team, right? So what you are doing is you are here spending a week, right? You are spending a month here, and you are just architecting the application before single customers. And by the time you validate it, you validate basically on the demand, right? And you have already because you have already spent your money. particularly you have already spent your real money actually, and I can say real time on the infrastructure. So this is like, what old approach that we people know, right? Because when you have like 15 or 20 years of experience, you know that old approach, how like, customer is coming, or even you have a product, right? So how you just deep dive into the architecture first, and then like, you will think on the database and a lot of things like, we work. But now in today's model, today's approach, how it's completely different. What you are doing, or what startup or founder will do, is first they validate it, right? Once you have an idea, you validate it, like, and there are tools like they are validating your idea, right? Using even nobody wants to like, read the line by line codes. Your tools are doing this. And when like, your demand gets proven before $1 of engineers, right? That you are spending on that. So that's actually a massive unlock. So what we are trying to say is here that the old model made you slow down by default, because there are a lot of things before developing you are just working on. But the new model doesn't, as I said, which means that you have to choose your own moment to slow down. And basically, like, most founders miss that moment because they are like, nothing to force for them. That's exactly like, we found the gap. We actually like discussed with a lot of founders by understanding their pain point. And this is like, here we say that, okay, uh, the the gap between particular this old model and new approach, they are not able to like, identify, because what they are trying to see is the business, how they are like, gaining more and more customers. So this is exactly the gap that we are going to talk about in our next chapter on the, or can say like, rest of the sessions. Okay, so while we discussed with a lot of founders, uh, the questions I get asked the most is that, you know, like, is my application, is my business is good enough, right? And this good enough isn't like only, a single bar, single tiers. So it's actually, there are different tiers, different bars are there. Those bars are like, first is like good enough to validate, right? So the question is that, can 10 stranger users, or can like, your nearby your friends, or maybe your 10 customers, can they are able to pay for that? If they are saying yes, then your first bar is clear, right? So your code quality is actually almost irrelevant for that. You just shipped it, right? So that's like, you can say your tier one. But when it says tier two, it means that good enough to sell. You have an MVP, right? That is already developed. Now you're thinking just about to sell. Maybe you're like, 10 or 15 users are using it. So what you'll do, like, can you demo this to your prospect, take their card, right, and have them come back after you are saying that, okay, you can use this application for, let's say, 15, maybe a week, or maybe a 15 days, right? So all these things, like, you will when you are trying to sell it, you will keep it in mind for that. And this is like, much higher than the previous one, than the tier one, right? And where I think almost like, a lot of AI built MVC are actually quietly failing because of maybe authentication issues, or maybe a permission issues, right? Or maybe data isolations. If I'll talk more, some technical approach, maybe your database architecture, right? Maybe your application is not scaling, because what you are just thinking, you are just trying to sell the product, right? So you will communicate with more and more users, but at the same time, your application will slowly become a problematic for the customer and for you also. And the third one is that good enough to scale the product. So uh, after you have your application is done, right, you will think on, can this application, can this like, architecture will handle the 100 times of users, can like, 10 time of the, or let's say, 10 new features can handle this. this new request by your applications? Can your team they can able to implement the new features, right? Or they can improve the speed or scaling of the applications without just breaking or something, right? So this is entirely different from the first two approach, basically. The mistake I see constantly is that founders treat this as in one binary, that they are just only thinking that whether this code is actually good or bad, right? But here actually the question is that confident answer, or can say answer from your friend, or maybe any AI code reviewer will exactly give you that whether it's a right time where you just need to scale up your application, or maybe you just really need to hold here. Let's say you have a 10 users right now, your maybe your code review or your technical friend is saying that okay, you really need to work on something just to scale up your application, so you really need to deep dive into the architecture side. So as a founder, right, you will definitely look into the or sit with your team just how you can scale up or how you can resolve the problems. So this is the slide, or I can say this is the sections most of most founders are looking for, right? So you have your MVP is working, you have real users, and you're just you're saying that okay, my application is good, right? But uh, while you are facing the applications, or slowly gradually you will face such a kind of issues. uh, so these are three options, or can say three principles that most founders are taking a wrong decisions, right? So the first one is leave it alone. What do you mean by leave it alone? So basically, when your application, when your MVP is ready, right, and you think that okay, I think I'm done with my idea, my validation. So for you as a founder, this is right call more often for you. If your MVP is still primarily answering that, does anyone want this, or your growth rate hasn't accelerated past like what you have developed with your current applications. If your system is able to handle it, or touching the code is often you're just wasting your time for that. So this kind of thoughts, this kind of signals will give you that okay, your application is at that stage where you really don't need to make, or just need to hurry just to grab the business, right? Here you will definitely going to have some problems, or there are chances you will lost your customer base even. The second option is the refactoring. uh, so this is the move when you are trying to shape your product in a right manner, right? But actually, the internals fragiles, like slowness of the applications, some things really need breaking, or it's hard to change, right? You even don't know when your customers are using it, right? You're not able to just stress. Lot of bugs are inside that, right? Because this is vibe coded applications. You even don't know how to trace the bugs, right? But fundamentally, slowing the right problem for the right users, right, for this kind of issues will definitely going to hit this. So refactoring means improving the core structure without changing what it does. And here, you will definitely, as a founder, you'll think that your application will have a lower risk, right? Right? Your features will be published very slowly, or maybe you can say incrementally you will think on that. And as a founder, this is a right call for you when you really want to refactor it, right? And the third one is the rebuilding. And this is actually an expensive, because as a founder you don't want to rebuild the entire application just because of your losing your business, right? So you will definitely going to think on this part, because rebuilding is when your architecture is actually massing up with your current user base or the current applications. So these are basically three options. And as I said, the framework, I can only mention that leave it alone if the bottleneck isn't engineering, refactor if the direction is right, but the execution is brittle, and rebuild only and only if the foundation itself is wrong. So just think, when you are facing such as issues, so you really need to keep in your mind these three particular pillars, can say, or the patterns. When you really want to go for refactoring, where you really, as a business owner or a startup founder, you really need to stop your application, saying that, okay, this is where I really need to stop for now. And as I said, if your foundation is actually on a different way, then you really need to think on the rebuilding, which of course costing and everything is is a huge impact as a software sorry, as a founder. So let's talk about this is the pillars that we discussed, but let's talk about something that shift our minds, because as an engineer, as a founder, when you say 0 to 1 engineering, it means we are thinking speed to signals. When you have every decision, whether it's a database or your code structure or maybe a testing, right? Everything should evaluate it against, does this help me to learn faster? Because over engineering at this stage is really a failure mode, that nobody really needs this kind of architecture, because it's your 0 to 1. You have a 10 users, you have 15 users. You will not think on microservice architecture. You will not think on some DR services. You will not, definitely, because it will cost you some money, right? So it's about speed to signal. It is about how you can validate the ideas by spreading by sending particular your idea just to validate with your customers. But when you say that your idea is actually validated, people are interested, then definitely you'll think on 1 to 100. And this is all about now engineering, because here you will not think on as a business side, because if you only think, then the problems we discussed, that is going to be pay you a huge cost as an failure as a founder, right? uh, so now it is speed to signals become a durability under the growth. You'll definitely going to think about growth, because now you are scaling your business, right? So, well, you are moving from 1 to 100. So the questions as a founder, you will definitely think on that. Can if I am planning to hire a new team, so you'll think on that. Can a new engineer understand? Can a new people who are joining my team, they really understand, my code in a first week, right? Can you add a new feature, or can your team add a new feature without regression testing by without doing that, right? Can your system survive 10 time traffic spikes without you personally staying up to the midnight? There's things are breaking in the midnight, and you will, as a founder, you will definitely think on that part. So those are things while you are actually trying to move or trying to scale your application from 1 to 100. So here the failure is it's not it is not an over engineering. It's actually a continuing to operate from 0 to 1 mode after you have already won the validation game. uh, team Teams that shipping whatever works past this point accumulate debt at exactly the moment their user base at least tolerate that instability. That is what word we can use for. So practically what we can take away from this, from switching from 0 to 1, 1 to 100 isn't only a code change or infrastructure, but I think it's a mindset change, because you will as I said, you will think on the business scaling. So everything is about your mindset. Like as a founder, how you are, thinking just to scale your application, how you will take care of the new customers at the same time, how you will take care of the old customers without breaking their current applications or that data, right? Okay. So these are the most, I can say, depth, technical depth that we actually, learn from the founders. As I said, like we discussed with a lot of founders, and we identified, like, these are the signs. They are actually, telling us which actually slowing down that business. So the first one is, let's say, every new features takes longer than the last one, right? So because of you're just focusing on the customer, you're not thinking on, like, architecture side. So uh, once, like, your application is breaking, not like, issues, bigger issues are coming, but a small issues will definitely uh, like, give you that kind of signals that what if, like, if I'm going to add a new features, and will it like, deployed successfully, will it, like, work properly. uh, Relevant to that, you will also think on that your team is afraid to deploy because uh, your team, right, it's a vibe coded application. They never like, go through like one by one single line of code. So of course, if things are breaking, they will, like, think on that, if I'll deploy this application or this new features, right? So hope it will not break. So it's a fear of deployment. It's like, direct signal that your system is actually in your failure mode, that is unmanaged. Bugs which are keep, repeating in a different forms. So this usually means that the root cause was never just fixing the bug, but instead what they are doing is they are just patching it, right? They are repeatedly patching just one once, just to resolve the issues. They are just patching, whether it's in code side or a database side. Again, a new thing, you will definitely think that what if I'll onboard a new developer, or maybe a new engineer, right? So hope that engineer will not take more time to understand the entire architecture. So that nobody, like, can explain how the system works without, like, just 2 or 3 of work hours. And for that, definitely there must be some sort of uh, architecture document, right? The documentation part is really important here. So it will help, not as a founder, but as in maybe your tech lead or some other developers. They just go through it, and they actually understand the entire architecture or the code base. Your team or yourself, like, afraid to touch the certain files, because there are some uh, can say nobody, like, knows that what files is having what, right? So new developer or new person is coming, so of course is not going to touch it, because of already application is, like, having some bugs. And if that's a mindset, if someone is trying to change it, hope, like, the developer will think that it will not break again. Then customer reported bugs. Yes. There are, I also, like, some founder says that when we are just trying, like, pitching to new customers, maybe, like, they have some references, and they heard that they are facing, like, your old customer is facing this kind of issues in the applications. Then what about the security? My data are sensitive, right? So these are the, like, things will definitely going to make some bad impact as a business owner against, like, while your customers are facing this kind of issues, or they are, like, sharing the uh, your I mean your application feedback. They are just, like, communicating. Then the last one, I can say, simple business requests turn into weeks uh, or So basically, uh, while your application is having a bug, and as an founder, or as an your team has committed certain timeline, they are let's say following some agile methodology. You have 2 weeks of sprint, right? But just because of those issues are there, you are not able to implement, or you are not able to achieve that deadline. And of course, here also, again, it's a loss for you as a business owner. You will definitely going to think these are serious concerns that we are keep hearing from the founders while we are discussing with them. All founders are saying that they have good MVP, designs is good, but while they are trying to scale this, and this is the major factors that we identified, and we thought it's a good, even even in my short sessions, I always focusing on this particular technical depth, because if you're thinking just to scale your applications, you really, really, really need to think on this particular areas. Then and then your applications, or you can easily communicate with your team. Okay, so after discussing with them, uh, if some founders are saying that okay, our applications are having a very good infrastructure, having a very good code base. So what I'm trying to to explain them, or trying to give them some sort of exercise, saying that okay, here are some exercise. Let's say your application is having a good number of good features, right? What if I'll give you next, let's say 25, 30, or maybe some next 50 features, right? Does your application support your next 50 without breaking the entire applications, or maybe a older portions, right? Without breaking a code base, without knowing, or maybe your team is doing some database changes, because for let's say for 10 to 15 users your architecture is already there. Now for the next 15 users, of course, those features will have some sort of communications, or can say uh, you know a primary key or kind of relationship between this. They have it, right? Because this next 50 features, of course, they have a dependency on your older one, or the previous features. So most technical depth isn't created by a one bad decision. It's actually created by dozens of individuals' reasonable shortcuts that never got revisited, basically. So three things worth doing before you scale your applications, or before you think that just to scale your velocity of the features. First is establish a real testing layer, even a lightweight, maybe it's a smaller feature, right? But you really need to take care of the testing. Do not publish your application, do not go live without testing it. Do regression testing, right? Now you can also use some AI tools for that, and they will definitely going to help you in terms of tasting and all. Without it, every new feature is risky, because as I said, a lot of time applications are actually breaking. So if you are planning to scale your application globally, let's say you are in region A and your B region is they are using your application, so it's like your bad impression, right? So testing is really, really important. Separate your business logic from your interface. So this is again totally an architecture part. How you actually maintain all the layers are distributed. Basically, they are not tightly coupled. Basically, so once your MVP is done from 1 to 100, this is like your part. This is a part where you really need to now think on the architecture side, because your one feature does not affect the other features. One feature is down, right? But it should not hamper, it should not affect the other one. So that way, you need to make your application a component based, or can say if your application is some microservice or architecture if you want to implement. So you really need to think on that way. So basically distributed application will help here. The third one is the document your data models. Uh, this is not for the compliance purpose, but let's say every changes have some documented, right? It is somewhere, if let's say your any new member is joining your team, so these documents will really help. And by reading and parallelly, by developing, that particular person is going to easily understand this architecture, and each and every documented things, they are keep reading and understand the current flow, and they know that by changing this, of course it is going to affect that. So this is the most important three things that really need to taken care, not only like 1 to 100 to 200. This is a best practice, I can say, that each and every founder, if they are good, if they want to scale up, if they are even at good phase, but these are basic practices that we really need to keep in mind, whether it's AI or anything, right? Even older developers, 15 or 20 years back, they all are following these principles. Okay, so here I want to make one point very clear here, because I think this is the most important reframe in this whole talk. Engineering decision is used to be treated as a cost center here, something the business tolerance, so the product exists basically. But every architecture decision you make today is actually a strategic bet about your future business, basically. So the founder who scale smoothly are not the ones they are good at code base, they know about everything, but they are the one who understood the problems, who understood when they want to scale the application. At the same time, they really need to scale up the architecture. They think that it, if they want to make the product successful, those that those signs, right, those things they will always keep in mind. Once you follow these patterns, once you follow these structures, your product will go smoothly without breaking even it. And of course, your team will there for the logging purpose, for tracking each and everything. This documentations, everything will help you. Okay, and the last one that we usually uh, give as an exercise to our founders even. There are some checklists that we have prepared just to scale your applications, and those are basic questions. As a founder, you will think that, okay, my application is there, so let's say, can a new engineer set up and run the project locally just in an hour without asking someone just to help him, just to set up everything? So here is, as I said, you'll think on the documentation part. It must be in a way that any member can read it easily, can set up the application easily. The second one, uh, is there any automated testing on your core user flows? uh, Maybe your core features, maybe a payment part, maybe any sign up part, right? The third one is, do you know what happens if traffic doubles overnight? Have you actually checked by doing some load testing, right? There are certain tools. While you are developing, you'll definitely think on this part also. From, if I want to scale it, let's say if I want to add a new features, right? Just wanted to publish it. So if people are trying to use that, it must work actually. So you really need to do testing, load testing for that. Is user data properly isolated and access controlled? Not just working demo, because datas are here important. Everyone talks about data, and the securities and everything, your customer will definitely going to ask. uh, can you deploy a small changes without redeploying the entire applications? So again, it's a distributed applications. You do not want to uh, publish the entire application, right? Because the way you create the architecture, uh, your small portion will only going to deploy, not the entire architecture. So you also need to keep it in mind that is there a single source of your data model documented somewhere. As I said, like documentation is most important, so you'll also think on that. Has anyone other than like original builder, you as an founder build an MVP by tools, right? So if someone or if someone join your organizations or your team, and let's say if you are busy in the marketing, what happened next? You are you are the only person who know about from A to Z. So yes, here KT or trainings and everything that things you maybe it's documentation at the end that you really, these are the checklists basically, and this checklist actually help you while you are trying to scale the application from not from 1 to 100 liter, but also like while you are thinking that you want to expand it globally. Okay. So I think the tools have they changed the way the developers worked. It's entirely changed, right? And the speed is actually here. The way people are developing, they are not thinking about just to dig around, into the architecture or everything. But the speed and launch was never the whole game. That's what I want to say. It was always just the first move. So as a business owner, of course, you will actually think on that from 1 to 10,000, how you are going to scale up the applications. So your AI will actually build your MVP, but what happened next? Whether it's refactoring, rebuild, or leave it alone, right? Now, it as a founder, it's totally up to you. You will, of course, again think on the science part. You will think on the three pillars, right? And you will think on the tier, which I explained. Uh, Hope this small session, this small discussion will help you guys to understand if you are planning to scale your application, what things you really need to keep in mind, right? And how uh, documentations, how from this 100 or 1 to 100, this kind of strategy you really need to work with your team basically. So hope this will help you, and thank you so much again for joining this webinar. And yeah, thank you, and would love to hear your feedback, your questions, so we can discuss actually.
Yeah, please feel free to ask your questions. Okay. So like one of the points that Mithul said, where like when you can choose to leave the vibe coded application as it is in that stage, like we have come across some ideas where people try to build internal tools maybe sometimes, or the application is so small that the user base is not necessarily not very big. Like let's say some organization tries to build a small CRM or the to-do list or something that they can internally operate on.
Right.
So they don't need to touch a lot in that case. Yes, some level of refactoring or some level of rearrangements will be needed to allocate more features, but it doesn't really need to touch a lot. What happens with the enterprise level application, or the aim is to have the B2B SaaS, where you are about to start GTM, or you are about to start thinking about having a GTM engineer on your team and start a campaign, start bringing the real users or the enterprises, where it's not about having only 1,000 or 2,000 users. It's about how much one user from that enterprise is using or creating the load on your application.
Right.
So the request amount of requests per second per enterprise per user matters, and that's why we have different silos where different types of subscription can be allocated different level of cloud services or the bandwidth to those kind of users. So these kind of calculations are necessary. What happens generally with the vibe coding app is that it's, as I said in the beginning, it starts with the emotion. a few users starts paying, but when you rewire your subscription packages, more serious users will start coming in, and it feels like to them it may feel like it's gonna break, or it has already broken when they enter after paying. So to avoid these kind of things, what our idea is to start igniting this thought in the people's mind, that when they start vibe coding from the beginning in different stages, they start thinking about architecture, which is very important. So by themselves as well, when they are starting with the vibe coding, they can go and do some research on architecture, and they can start with some architecture. And then from there, we can help them refactor and scaling. Otherwise, there are some stages where it will be needed to be, started from the scratch, rebuild, and to make it more mature than what it is at the vibe coding stage.
Right.
So, yep, this is what we had, for now. In the future, in the upcoming weeks, what we are planning to do is to have more depth in our sessions, have more discussion on architecture, thinking about, resource allocation on the server, and cloud and integration and all these such things. But yeah, we are sure, and we are committed that we're gonna meet again very soon in the next session. In the meantime, if you have any question, you can reach out to Mitul, to me, and yep, this is all in all we have for today. In case you have any question, we can continue, or it's time to say goodbye for today. Okay, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for joining this session. We will meet very soon. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Bye
Thank you.
soon. Bye.
Good day. Thank you.